Hey everyone, it's me, Ben Avery, and this is Strangers and Aliens from strangersandaliens.com. And as you can tell from my wall right here, this is my living room wall, my portion of my living room wall, and this is Christmas time. And so I decided for this edition of Is It Worth Reading that I would take a look at a story that, well, it's a classic for a reason, and it's a story that I love so much. I used to read this book every year. For a long while, I read it every year, and then it's been a long time since I've done that. It's been a long time since I've read the book. I've watched the movies a lot, but it's been a long time since I've gotten into the book, so I decided to get the book out Sunday afternoon and give it a read. It is a quick, brief read, but I'm going to ask the question about this thing. Is it worth reading? And you already know the answer because I'm talking about it, so the answer is probably yes. I mean, it has to be a real train wreck for me to talk about it, and the answer is not yes. But is it worth reading? Yeah, obviously, it's going to be worth reading, but it's worth reading for a lot of different reasons, and most of those reasons are just checking off the boxes for Strangers and Aliens. It's fantasy. It's got time travel. It's got Christian themes in it. And so this is a book that it's no surprise what book I'm going to be talking about here. A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol. This book is a book that I love so much. And when I read it this last time, it just got me so excited to talk about it. We're going to be talking about it on the audio podcast as well, where we'll have a longer conversation with me and my co-hosts Steve and Evan, and that'll be posted around the same time as this video. But here I just want to do my is it worth reading? And as I said, you probably know the answer is yes. But let's take a look. One of the things I like to do when I review something is take a look at 4 different quadrants. There's 4 different areas to kind of explore as you're trying to decide how to review something and how to talk about it and how to decide if this is something worth recommending. It's characters, it's story and plot, it's themes, and its style. And so today I'm going to do that real quick and just kind of go through those 4 parts. Now, a 5th part that I've also included has been just the fun factor. And there are things actually that I would say probably don't have very high scores in those other 4, those artsy parts, but it's fun anyway. But this book, especially after I read it this last time, I really just, as I was reading it, was like, just getting excited about just all those different parts. And so I'm going to start with characters. And the characters, obviously, I don't really need to introduce some of these characters. You know about Tiny Tim. You know about Bob Cratchit. You know about Scrooge. You know about Marley. You know about the Ghost of Christmas Past and the Ghost of Christmas Present and the Ghost of the Christmas Future. Now, some of those characters don't have much character development. Yeah, Scrooge, he's the one who obviously has the big character arc. That's what the book is about. I mean, really, all these characters exist for Scrooge's benefit as a character. And hopefully, as you're looking at, like, who am I in this book, you're going to see Scrooge. You're thinking Scrooge is me, and that development into a character who goes from being selfish to being selfless, But we want to be Tiny Tim. We want to be Bob Cratchit. We want to be the Ghost of Christmas Present and Past and Future, who are out there helping other people to be able to have their Scrooge moments and be a part of their story. And if there's one theme you can pull out of this, I'm kind of skipping ahead to themes, but if there's one theme you can pull out of this, it's that, it's true. We are a part of other people's stories. We are the main character of our own story, but we are a part of other people's stories, and we should be encouraging them and pushing them toward being better and eventually, ultimately, hopefully, especially with your family and close circles and friends, pushing them to being part of the kingdom of God, not just being a better person, but being a person who is part of God's kingdom. So that's our characters. Then we have the story, the plot, which is classic because it's just been retold so many times. You may have no idea what's inside this book as far as the words go, but you know what's inside this book because you've seen it over and over again. I mean, I've even seen it in commercials where in like 30 to 60 seconds, they're able to take the Scrooge story and tell the whole thing where he's bah humbug and then he's, Merry Christmas. So that's our story and plot. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it works. I mean, it is a time travel story where he visits the past and realizes he can't change the past. And then he sees other places in the present and he's able to see what's going on around him, the way other people are keeping Christmas. And then he's able to kind of take a glimpse into the future where if nothing changes, that's what the future is going to look like. But because he can change, and this is another big theme of the book, is that you can't change the past, but you can learn from it. And as you are moving toward the future, you can work on changing the future, making the future better, learning from the past, moving forward into the future. Now, then there's also the style part of my quadrant that we have. And this book, this most recent time as I was reading it, I was really just enjoying and just savoring the words and the word play you have in here. And there's a reason why a lot of times movies will just quote verbatim from this book because they want to keep that wordplay. Here's the description of Scrooge at the very beginning of the book. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. I mean, that's just some amazing wordplay that Charles Dickens has there. And then there's the classic line where he's confronting the ghost of Marley, and Marley is, started this conversation with him, and Marley asked, "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be a bit of undigested beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." I love that line. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. And I remember the first time I read this, it was in high school. I think it was in Mr. Beeson's class. I'm not sure. But the first time I read this, I read that line and I just thought that is hilarious. That is just the wordplay again, just the way it wraps around itself. And yeah, just fun stuff. Then you have the themes of this book, and we've already talked about a couple of them, but you have a big part of this is when he is being confronted by Belle in the past, and she's talking about how he's changed, and it's talking about his hope. He says, "Have I ever sought release from Belle?" And she says, "In words, no, never." And he says, "In what then?" And she says, "In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end." And you see that he just puts his hope in, it's money. He puts his hope in money. And this, I've been thinking a lot about hope and thinking a lot about actually kind of some of the Star Wars stuff, images of hope from Star Wars, which I actually talked about in some of my Advent devotionals that I did a few years ago on YouTube. But she's talking about his hope, and his hope is in money. His hope is in cash. He came from a background where he didn't have as much, and so now he wants more. He wants to be safe, but he's never going to have enough. And then along with this final theme that I want to talk about is you have this idea of just keeping Christmas, this idea of living your life as a life of charity, as a life of Christ-likeness. Then you have Tiny Tim, who, this is kind of going along with that. He wants to make an impact on the world. And so Bob Cratchit is talking about Tiny Tim. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. And so then you have the big turning point for Scrooge. And the big turning point comes with some bargaining where he's talking to the ghost of Christmas future, and he's saying, I don't want to see this. I don't want this to happen, where his death is something that's celebrated. And his lesson, he says it outright. He says, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. And then it says he did change. In the very final paragraph, he had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that truly be said of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one. As I'm looking at this book and kind of thinking through like a challenge to you, I guess I would ask, how do you keep Christmas? How do you keep Christmas? And hopefully you're going to keep Christmas the way Scrooge did, which is all year round. This change in Scrooge made me think of this verse here in the book of Matthew, Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus says, he's separating the sheep from the goats, and he says, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And that's what Scrooge did. I mean, he helped the least of these. He helped Tiny Tim. Tiny Tim helped Scrooge. I just thought of this when I was reading it this last time, where you have this image of Tiny Tim wanting people to remember Christ by seeing him. And that's what happened with Scrooge. That's what happened with Scrooge. He saw Tiny Tim, and because of that, he changed to become something more Christ-like. Now, I'm not saying that Charles Dickens was writing a devotional book when he was writing about Scrooge, but he kind of was. This is not a weak connection. This is a pretty obvious connection that Charles Dickens was trying to make. But he has this person who was changed by seeing this young boy who was sick and who needed help, and who hoped that people would remember Christ. And that's what happened. Scrooge made a change. He had a change. And while it's not necessarily a moment of belief in, asking Jesus into his heart, it's one of the greatest changes of characters in all of literature. And it's just beautiful. It's lovely. I love it. And so, is it worth reading? Yes. If you've never read the book, you can read it for free online. There are many places where you can get this thing. It's in the public domain. You can also buy a nice volume. My volume, I'm not going to pick it up right now, but my volume that I have has a bunch of other holiday writings by Charles Dickens. But yeah, is it worth reading? Yes. Is it worth watching the movies? Definitely. So, with all that said, I want to say thank you so much for spending time with me. Please hit like, hit subscribe. Please check out the podcast on strangersandaliens.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And so now I want to leave you with this. As Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone, and Godspeed.